To all those people watching, I would like to remind everyone that this video is not made strictly for kids. It is for older fans and adults too. Enjoy the fucking video! This video is brought to you by my loyal patrons. Register now at any tier to watch new videos 1 month in advance before they're made public. Link is in the description. A week had come and gone, and George's punishment had been lifted. But if you were to ask any of the workmen, they made you think the fat controller had meant to punish them. All the same, George was happy to get rolling again. Recently, the fat controller had made plans to renovate the line that ran up to Hawin Lake. This included the roads. However, both rail and road were unfit for regular traffic, so George had to take the workmen and their tools in special wagons. Unfortunately, he had to stay till long into the night until the men had finished their work for the day, so he could take them home afterwards. He hated even the thought of it and grumbled dreadfully.
"I'm no bus. Why must I bring the workmen back? Bulgy doesn't even run that late."
"Oh, quit your boiler raking," said his driver. "Or would you rather be back at the lumber mill?" George subsided at once, but muttered something beneath his breath. The workmen loaded their tools and boarded the living van. With a reluctant shrill whistle, George rumbled away. Their journey was uneventful, and before long they reached the abandoned road. It was potholed and scattered with broken branches across the lane that had grass protruding from beneath the poorly constructed road. Even in the daylight, the vast, open, empty space gave the steamroller a rather uneasy feeling. George and the men worked all day, chipping away at the old road and laying down fresh tar. Before long it was dark and the men were still working.
George was annoyed. "How do you expect me to get any rest before work tomorrow? It's nearly midnight,"
grunted George.
"I'm down,"
yawned one of the workmen. "Nearly ready to call it a night."
"Took you long enough,"
scoffed George.
"You're not worried about one of your precious beauty sleep,"
teased one of the wagons.
"We think you're just spooked."
"Pah!"
snorted George.
"I've no reason to be afraid of the dark."
"He never mentioned anything about the dark," teased another, and the wagons cackled mockingly. George gritted his teeth. Though you'd never hear him admit it, he was feeling nervous. George trundled back home at a snail pace. By now, all the workmen had all dozed off, and George's driver had a cup of coffee so as not to fall asleep himself. George tried to keep an open mind, but his imagination was getting the better of him.
"Nothing to be afraid of. Nothing to be afraid of,"
he thought to himself. It was then that his lamp mysteriously flickered out of life. "Crumbs!" exclaimed the driver. George came to a slow stop. "Woo!" wailed the wagons in a chilly unison. "Quiet!" stuttered George, trying to sound tough. Just then the wind picked up and the dead trees started rustling violently. A cold shiver was sent trickling down George's boiler, and his fire went seemingly cold. The wagons, who began to regret their teasing, were also starting to worry. Suddenly, a massive gust of wind uprooted one of the dead trees and sent it toppling down, just missing George. Both he and his driver jumped, and the steamroller lurched back, jetting the wagons and the van in awkward positions. The men woke up with a start and hurried out to see what had happened. When George's driver explained, one of the men immediately ran back to the van, grabbed his tools, and began mending the broken lamp. "Right as rain," he said at last. "Away we go." After everyone had recovered, they found a detour and continued on through the fog, which seemed to dance exclusively along the old road. George's eyes darted the empty, seamlessly endless horizon on either side. He thought he could make out an ominous shape looming from the pitch dark, watching him balefully. Before long they reached the yard and everyone returned to their homes. George was left alone. He was glad to be back in his cozy shed, but even so it took him nearly all night to drift asleep. Next morning George woke up after a restless night. The bags beneath his eyes were enough to convince anyone of that. Now, most of the engines knew George as a stubborn, rude and grumpy steamroller. But now any engine he encountered would see a side of him that no one knew existed. They looked at him and saw genuine fear, as if he'd seen a ghost. Even they had begun to express concern for their old adversary. Later, his driver returned. "Right, George, it'll be just us tonight. Those workmen refuse to work any more graveyard shifts. Can you believe those cowards? Afraid of a little wind," he scoffed.
Grown men. Afraid of a bit of wind? Ha! How pitiful,
scoffed George, trying to match his driver's arrogance. But secretly he sided with the workmen. "Oh well," his driver said as he loaded the tools into the wagons. "More money for us." And they set off back down the old road. It was already late by the time they had reached it, and dusk was upon them. George was getting nervous, but played it off by complaining.
I don't see the point in being out this late during road work,"
he grunted, trying to hide his shaken voice. "Oh, don't tell me you're scared too," said his driver.
"Don't be stupid,"
replied George a bit too quickly.
"I just find it hard to see where I'm going when it becomes darker out."
"Well, then it is a good thing I fixed his old number then," said his driver, pulling out a lamp from a wagon.
"Oh, never mind then,"
replied George. His driver listened to music while he worked, and soon he had finished laying the tarmac. By then it was already dark. George felt his eyelids getting heavier and heavier by the second. Suddenly he heard a thud that made his steam pressure spike. His driver, exhausted from his lack of rest the night before, had toppled to the ground in a deep sleep, and the wagon soon followed suit. George now felt truly alone. Just then it happened again. His lamp had mysteriously gone out. The wind picked up, and now the music from his driver's radio had begun looping, presenting an unsettled ambience. "Help!" he whimpered. George was stiff and didn't dare make any sudden movements. It was then that he did. George had begun moving. As desperately as he tried, he just couldn't whistle for help. He just kept rolling eerily through the fog.
"Stop! I want to stop!"
he wailed, wishing it was all a bad dream. Suddenly he heard a rumbling beneath him. Before he could say anything else, the ground gave way and he descended down into a sinkhole belonging to an old mine shaft. George went pale. He had never been so afraid, but it wasn't over yet. As the dust settled, he looked up and shuddered as he could see a shadowy humanoid figure locking eyes with him. George shut his eyes tightly.
"Only a dream. Only a dream,"
he panted. Just then the figure charged at George full sprint, letting out a blood-curdling screech that made him enter a panic frenzy. "Help! Help! Help!" he yelped. George was horrified and refused to open his eyes till morning came. And when it did, he awoke to see his driver being questioned by the authorities while Butch was helping tow him out from the sink pit. "What happened last night?" asked his driver. George couldn't talk. A haunting image of the figure still burnt deeply in his mind. "An answer today would be nice," said the driver crossly. George looked slowly at his driver, a look of pure terror still pasted upon his muted face. The driver looked at his engine, now understanding the seriousness of it all, having never seen George act this way.
"Please don't make me come back here,"
pleaded George ominously. His driver, who now felt sorry for George, only nodded in agreement. To this day, George isn't sure if what he experienced that night was a nightmare, or if it actually happened. He chooses to believe it was just a bad dream, but some nights when he's tucked away in his shed, he's sure he could see the figure peering through the window of his shed. His driver assures him it's only his fears getting the better of him. George only hopes his driver is right. Wouldn't you?